Jan Goetz is CEO and co-founder of IQM Quantum Computers, one of the most ambitious quantum hardware companies built anywhere in Europe. Joining him is Daniel from World Fund, who will lead the conversation. Please welcome both of them.
So, from one beacon of hope, Hermann Hauser, to another beacon of hope, Jan Goetz. We just heard a lot about quantum computing, so it's my honor to have a fireside chat with Jan here on stage at the Deep Tech Momentum. My name is Daniel. I'm co-founder and general partner at World Fund. We invest in deep tech, climate tech, everything that can decarbonize, and one of our investments is IQM. And so I'm more than proud that we can share, I think, some amazing news and information today. And let's start with maybe a brief introduction to you, Jan, and let me introduce you like a scientist turned founder, turned entrepreneur, turned super marathonist. And we're looking forward to an IPO. But how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I would introduce myself as a kind of scientist at heart and an entrepreneur kind of to the outside, trying to make sure that we build machines that we have never been building before as humankind to solve problems where we know today we will never be able to solve them with our current computer technology. It's a journey, and of course when I started this journey I didn't know exactly where to go and what the destination is. But it's getting clearer and clearer as the technology evolves, and you learn along the way. And when I started my scientific career, I thought you learn a lot during your studies or you learn a lot during your PhD. But actually, kind of the learning curve during an entrepreneurial kind of adventure, like starting a company, is just insane.
What's the main difference between being a scientist and becoming an entrepreneur?
That's a good question. Maybe the other way around. What's the similarity? And the similarity is the mindset. So if you're a scientist, basically what matters is that you do things that no one else has done before, and then you write about them and you make them publish in publications. So really, with mediocre approaches, you never become a good scientist, because you need to push the boundaries of physics or chemics or whatever it is. And you need to do things where other people think they are impossible. And this mindset, obviously, you also need as an entrepreneur, right? You build a company for a business model where people say, okay, it's not going to work, or we don't even understand it or know it. For technology, that's not there. So I think it's the same mindset that you need, but of course, then there are differences. So in science, usually people don't care so much about leadership. If you think about what's happening at the universities, PhD students come every 3-4 years and they go, nobody really cares. And if you build a company, if you build a team, it's a lot about the people and finding the best people, leading the people, and understanding your competition, and a lot of strategic thinking. So there are similarities in the mindset, I would say, but there are lots of differences in the execution and the leadership part.
We'll speak a lot about leadership. I'm also very grateful that I asked you, okay, what questions would you like me to ask you? And you said, like, please, just ask. I don't like anything that is prepared before. And I'm very happy about that, because before I turned investor, I was a journalist. So I was working and moderating panels, asking questions, so I can do that again, like after 10 years. So we'll speak about leadership. And be prepared. I'll ask you a bit about your journey, and I know that it was not an easy path. I definitely also want to speak about what do we need quantum for. We heard before Q-Day, etc., so there's a lot of danger, but there's a lot of opportunity. And a third topic that is very close to my heart is Europe, right? So when it comes to Europe today and technologies, we can see that the United States and China are kind of, lifting up while Europe is watching. But it maybe only seems so, and IQM is one of the proofs that science can be turned into a company that is successful. So let me start with the question, what was the hardest thing you had to go through to get into a situation you are now in, looking forward to an IPO that will happen in kind of 2 months?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2018, raised the first funding round in 2019, and then a couple of rounds afterwards. And this was a time until maybe 21, 22, when capital was quite available, especially for tech, deep tech. There was zero interest, and investors were basically jumping on opportunities, which was great. And we used this, and we grew the company quite strongly with this. But then we all know that things have changed. Interest rates have changed. After COVID, a lot of other things have changed as well, and fundraising became much tougher. And it wasn't anymore that you just put quantum on a pitch deck and someone would give you money. The questions got much tougher, and also I think investors kept more to their money to make sure that their portfolio companies survive, right? So overall, fundraising was difficult, and then also, of course, building technology is difficult, especially in deep tech. And we sell a lot into in public procurement. So we sell to government organizations, and we all know that they are notoriously slow. So the business process was maybe not so strong as we thought. So we were really struggling on the funding side, which means at some point, also as a founder, you look at the bank account and you see kind of how it's going down. And if you do a little bit of maths, you know what this means in timelines. And the team as well, right? And usually in startups, you're quite transparent about this. And at some point, it was clear we need to do things differently. And also we had to restructure a little bit the company. And actually, we also had to reduce the team size a bit at that point in time. And this is tough, especially for people like me. I'm more like a sunshine CEO. I think I can tell the story in a way that people get inspired and follow and invest. But then when it gets tough and making these very hard decisions, that's not my sweet spot. So getting out of the comfort zone there and finding a team around you who's helping you through this time, this was clearly the toughest part of the journey.
Yeah, let's have this as a takeaway. It's something I also had to learn, but yeah, you need to sometimes make hard decisions to get your company through, to make it more efficient, etc. And today, we didn't mention that IQM is the company that is selling most quantum computers on Earth, more than any other company, so more than IBM, for example. You just talked about the situation where you didn't have any revenue. I, in all humbleness, want to say that we led the round you had in 2022 as World Fund. You raised 128 million, so quite some capital, and you used that to overcome something that we call the commercialization gap at World Fund. So investing into companies that still have no revenue, but a huge product that is coming up, which can not only create market, but conquer those markets and become a multi-billion dollar and euro company. So this is an important summary, I think, to mention. How was it possible to get there? I'm not talking about leadership now, but about product, basically products, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a mindset thing, at least in our case, and I think in many other deep tech companies as well, where you have scientific founders who understand the technology very well, and often they fall in love with the technology, but they don't fall in love with the features that the customers like. And even the concept of a product, for me, it was completely new, coming from the university side. What I thought back then is that, hey, we talk often that things go so well in the Silicon Valley. So let's look at what's happening there and talk to people there. And I started having regular calls with someone from the Silicon Valley who was based there, and used him kind of as a challenger of my ideas. And he constantly told me, hey, IQM is a product company. You should think first, what's your product, what's you selling, and how are you selling this? And repeated it like 100 times probably, until I started realizing that, okay, actually it's also about the science, but it's not only about the science. It's about building something where a customer says, hey, I really want this, and I'm willing to pay money for this. And that's a mindset thing. And actually, at the moment, we do have scientists who were part of the very early team, really very, very clever people. They join our sales team, not even the product team, but they join our sales team because they get so excited that someone is now paying money for things that they have been previously developing at the university. This was unbelievable for them. So I think if you create this spark in the head of the people that, hey, actually, the technology that you build, it's not only fancy and super advanced, but it has real value, I think then you kind of made a huge step in the development of the company.
Maybe this also, because it was not mentioned before also in the discussion, what value can quantum computing create? What can we do with quantum?
Yeah, so I think it was mentioned by Herman before. It's about these very complex problems. He used the word complexity class. And there is a kind of a set of problems where the mathematical structure is so hard that you really cannot do it with transistor-based computers because the logic doesn't fit. And the logic that we use on a quantum computer works differently, and you can take shortcuts there. And the interesting thing is that you find such applications in basically any industry. And these are problems which are not necessarily super huge in size. So it's not about training LLMs with trillions of parameters, because we don't get a lot of kind of data through the processors. But it's about those problems, even though they are quite small in size, they can become very complex. And these can be, for example, these molecular simulations and the like. But then also where the technology is today is that we are still on the way there. And in our case, we are building computers, we are developing chips, we are producing chips. And this is semiconductor industry in the end. And in semiconductors, we had Moore's law for kind of decades. And if you look at the picture of the first kind of transistor-based computers, they were like a few transistors literally lined up. And then over decades, the technology has evolved to unlock all the applications that we do now. And we think in quantum it's going to be very similar, that over decades we are going to unlock applications.
Let's be a bit more specific. What can we do with quantum computers? So we, as World Fund, care a lot about decarbonization. So we also invested because there's many use cases in the climate space, new materials, etc. Maybe you have some more specific examples in mind.
Yeah, and we did the study together back then and looked at the use cases and the impact it can have on reducing the CO2. And I think the good news is we didn't need to identify too many to already kind of tick the box, so to say. One use case, now very specifically, that we have been doing with Volkswagen in the field of electric batteries. So it's electrification of cars, and it's the material science in there. Another use case that we actually also, I think, looked together at is in electrical grids, power grids, and grid stabilization. We did this with EDF, a French power company. But then we also, if you think about pharmaceuticals, it's actually the pharma sector is also a strong contributor to CO2 emissions, and a lot of stuff is still happening in the lab because you cannot solve these molecular problems, and this is something that we do. And now just to make it very tangible, what we do in the end is we sell computers into big data centers and place them there next to the GPUs and CPUs, and then they work together, like in an orchestra, where each instrument plays the part where it's best at. And we play the quantum part, and the GPU plays the GPU part. And what we very specifically, for example, have been doing in this hybrid approach is we have been reaching chemical accuracy for molecular simulations with maybe some 10 atom kind of configuration. So this is where we are today. We know it works, we reach the results that you need, but we still need to scale up the technology to really make it commercial from this perspective.
Yeah. So you are already commercial. You have revenues that are higher than any other quantum company on Earth, except for one company where I'm not super sure that their revenue is derived purely from quantum. But put that aside, I just want to make the case why I'm so overly convinced that IQM will become a decacorn already this year. I mean, we will go public at the valuation of 1.8 billion. And when we look at your peers that have lower revenue, they're valued between 4 and 20 billion. So the only question I ask myself is like, is it possible, as the other companies are non-European, IQM will be the first European quantum company to list at the Nasdaq and later in Helsinki as well. Is it maybe a disadvantage that you are European, that we are European, and could it be that the valuation is going to be lower than compared to the other peers? What's your thinking here?
Yeah, I think overall we tend to complain a lot about Europe and what is not going well. I think what we should do rather is we should accept these challenges and turn them into opportunities. Because we cannot change the reality, right? As an entrepreneur, of course, I can be very idealistic and say, hopefully in 10 or 20 years, we have one capital market union or whatever it is. But we live today, and we need to build companies today. And this means we have to kind of turn these challenges into opportunities. So for example, if you think about the market fragmentation, What this means is there are 27 governments and we are selling to governments, so I can sell 27 times. Yay, that's great, right? So instead of complaining, let's find these opportunities. And the same with the capital markets. So we have announced a dual listing. So we do a listing in Helsinki, where we are headquartered, and then in the US, and both of those stock exchanges belong to the Nasdaq group. And we do think we can combine the best of two worlds there, because we know there is strong kind of capital markets in the US, but we do have very strong institutional support also here in Europe. So I think instead of thinking, how is this now again maybe a challenge, or are we going to be lower valued, higher valued? I think what we always should do is think about, okay, how can we take this challenge and make it something positive? And this is what we try to do basically every day. And from this perspective, I'm very convinced we are going to build not only kind of from Europe, but actually globally a very leading company in this field.
I need to ask you the question as I know that we've been searching. I mean, now I'm approached by our investors and also other big funds why they've been not invited to invest in your latest round that is happening pre-IPO. And I remember that we approached many investors who are now sad that it was the last chance. In the end, you had an American lead investor. Oh no, American and Finnish, right? So we also participated, but still, in the end, it was necessary to have an American investor on board. So how do you think about that? I mean, would you have been happier with a pure European solution, or is it good as it is?
Well, overall, I think it's good if we bring US capital to Europe to fuel the growth here. I think that's generally a good thing, and we should do more of this. Of course, we should not have our companies kind of leaving to the US. That's a different thing. And also, if we do a listing also on the US exchange, right, it doesn't mean that we flip the company. We stay a European company. What it means is we bring US investment here to grow, and then we build products that, again, we sell to the US. So we get the money twice, in a way. We have been selling in the US meanwhile. So I think this is the approach that we should take. And actually, it wasn't so that we were desperately looking for someone and then we had to take the US investor. It was more so that we were thinking about this more strategically. We were kind of envisioning that probably it's going to end up in some kind of an IPO story at the end of the day, and probably the US has to play a role there. So this was actually a deliberate choice to say we want to have a US lead investor to help us grow the business and kind of connect to the US investor base, which we didn't have so much before. And again, so I think instead of saying, oh, that's always a challenge and the big rounds can only be led by the US funds, I think we can also do the other way around and say, hey, let's make this an opportunity. We bring someone in late stage and they bring all their friends with them, because this is what they did, right? Then they started calling their Silicon Valley friends and other friends, and more people invested. So I think, again, this is the mindset that we should have at the end of the day to make it work.
Where will you be with IQM end of this decade? We heard before that Q-Day is happening potentially in 2029, like all encryption, etc. So quantum seems to be more powerful than we thought only a few years ago. Where do you think will quantum computing be, and what role will IQM play in 2030?
Yeah, when you go public, then you get all these lawyers on your desk and tell you you're not allowed to make any forward-looking statements.
Yeah.
But of course, overall, I mean, it's clear that the quantum market will be big, and you can ask McKinsey or Boston Consulting or your favorite firm, and they will all give you a huge number. So that's not the question. And of course, our ambition level is to be a leading company in the field. Usually in computing, it's not a winner-takes-it-all thing. If you look at high-performance computing, you have other names there like Dell, Lenovo, HPE, and others. But clearly, our ambition is to be the leading player for quantum computing when it really comes to unlocking applications. And but we see ourselves as more than just providing computers or selling computers. Our goal is to be an ecosystem builder. We're creating a complete new industry here. This means we build the supply chain alongside. Many startup companies in quantum grow with us, and we buy their components. We kind of grow on the application side with the customers. So ultimately, we want to be the leading ecosystem builder for quantum computing and build a whole ecosystem around us.
Before I open up the discussion to the audience, so if you have a question, feel free to ask. I want to ask one last question, and it is, as I said, Europe is close to my heart. I think that all of us are aware of the geopolitics and that we in Europe really need to step up when it comes to tech innovation to really not to be too dependent from yeah, other continents. What would you, with all your learnings, I mean, we're still not there, right? We need to have the IPO, and IQM is still like in its early stages, although it's massively promising. As I said, decacorn until the end of this year. But you learned a lot, and what would you share with deep tech founders here regarding Europe? You already said don't only see the challenges, see the opportunities, but what if we can be more helpful and more specific? What is it, what you would tell someone who's maybe complaining, it's so hard, capital raising, they don't understand. What would you tell such a founder based on the learnings you had?
Well, unfortunately, it's hard, and it's going to stay hard. So I think what we need is
go running.
Yeah, go running. In my case, I went running and I started running marathons, but which is also hard. So you do something hard to don't feel the pain of the other hard thing anymore. But I think it's this mindset thing again, right? We need to find our solution. So we need to set the North Star very clearly, clear targets, and say, this is what we are going to do, this is what we are going to build. And then we need to take the punches in our face, right? And we need to be resilient enough and strong enough and stand up. And you need to build a like also personally as a founder or entrepreneur, you need to build a network around you who you can trust, who you can come back to and say, hey, again, someone or something went wrong, and I really feel down. And then there needs to be someone who helps you up. And of course, you need to make sure that your friends, also on the private side, your family is there, because you tend to work a lot as a founder, and you forget the time. It's sometimes important also to kind of remind yourself that, hey, there's something beyond what you're building. I think that's super important.
Can I ask you directly, personally, who the resource for you was in that situations?
Well, of course, I have a wonderful family, wonderful wife, and this is what kind of stabilizes you on a day-to-day basis. But then also friendship. I still have very strong ties to my hometown, where I went to school, and then people there. So sometimes I just go there, we hang out and have a drink in the garden. I think that's the essence, right? That there are people. It's not that you talk to them every day, but you know when it's not the best day of the year, whatever time of the day it is, you can go there and they will open the door and be there for you.
So if there's questions in the audience, yes, please.
Thank you. A question maybe more to Jan on applications on quantum computing in blue and green energetics. Have you witnessed any first applications? And if so, what is the demarcation criteria? Which player is big enough, or which player would qualify for optimization of energy trading, storage, production, or multi-asset optimization?
Okay, I get quite complex question, but I think overall what we see on the adoption side is that industry is leaning in quite heavily, and they are getting ready. Sometimes we call this quantum readiness. And what this means is what they're doing at the moment is they're building up internal capabilities. They're identifying use cases. So if you think about energy transition or so, probably you can build up a list of whatever 50 use cases. And then you need to build up the capabilities, the team, the know-how, and then you need to start experimenting. So they start running algorithms, applications, maybe on our cloud systems first, and see what this means and what are the timelines for them to get this into production. So this is roughly the phase where we are today. And I would guess almost every large company at the moment is looking at quantum. So they're all doing it in the background already.
I'll allow myself. You have another question?
Yeah, would you be so kind to name a few examples of maybe the big companies to get a grasp which company is big enough? Because we attempted a couple of years ago and when every player was too small.
I don't know if there's like a size limit or something like this. I think in the end what you need is someone who is keen to explore new innovation, new technology. It's again a mindset thing. Because at the moment, at least, it doesn't require a lot of investment, right? If you want to do something through the cloud or so, you don't need a lot of capital investment to do this, but you need both at the leadership of these companies and then also on the, let's say, R&D teams, you need people who believe in it, who want to be the early adopters. But there is also evidence that if you are an early adopter, actually, at the end, you gain more from it. So this is why we keep on saying you need to engage early in the new technologies to make the full benefit out of it.
We have 1 minute left, and I would love to use that. If you could share a few more informations about the IPO or the next month, what is coming up, and is there a chance to invest?
So we have been announcing that we go public. We have been submitting our file with the SEC in the US and with the administration or the regulators also in Finland. So this is an ongoing process, and we are now basically in this feedback loop with them. And we don't know exactly how long this takes. But if you look at other company who went public through a similar route, and you do the math, then this will bring you to maybe mid-July-ish, end July-ish, depends a little bit. But we cannot guarantee this. It's not in our hands. It's in the hands of the SEC. And after this happens, of course, the shares trade. They trade directly in Helsinki. Or then in the US, it's through these ADRs, an ADR program. And everyone, in principle, of course, can kind of get engaged with these processes.
I'm wishing you all the best for your path, for IQM, for you personally. I didn't have the chance to really also share how deeply impressed I am, because I'm following you, of course, by nature for years already. I know what you went through, what you have achieved. And by the way, he's running a marathon in 2:49. Who is in marathon knows that this is, I don't know, 0.0001% of the runners. Like, wow. And I think this is those kind of people we need to build companies in Europe who are resilient, who are just staying on the path. Sometimes you need to go left, right, up, down. But yeah, believe in it, and thank you very much for being a beacon of hope. Thank you, Jan.